Have you ever noticed how people act one way in front of you, but reveal something completely different when you're not around? They smile, they nod, they pretend. But behind closed doors, the truth slips out. The quiet judgments, the subtle digs, the things they never had the courage to say to your face. It's like borrowing someone's hand free, hearing only the track they want you to hear. But the moment you unplug, you realize another song was playing underneath, one you were never supposed to hear. Or think of a needle and thread. They stitch you into their lives when it's convenient, but the moment you pull away, they claim you were never part of the fabric to begin with. That's how people talk when you're not around. They rewrite the story, adjust the volume, and reshape your truth to fit their comfort. Because here's the Stoic truth. What others say in secret reveals the shadows they carry inside. And while you may never hear the exact words, you'll feel them. In their silence, their hesitation, their sudden distance when your name comes up. In this video, we'll break down 7 subtle signs that reveal what people secretly say about you when you're not in the room, and how Stoic wisdom helps you respond with power, clarity, and unshakable calm. Stay until the end, because the last one will change how you interpret silence forever. Let's begin. Number 1. They reveal their own character, not yours. Let's talk about one of the most revealing things people do behind closed doors. What they say about you when you're not around. At first, you might not notice it. Maybe you hear from someone else that your name came up in a conversation. Maybe a joke was made at your expense, or someone repeated something you said with just enough of a twist to change the meaning. And slowly, it hits you. People aren't always silent in your absence. But what they say, it's not really about you, it's about them. Here's the truth. What people say about you in your absence says more about their soul than your story. The insecure gossip, the jealous exaggerate, the wise stay silent. Those who are at peace with themselves don't waste energy tearing others down. But those who are unsettled, they use your name as a shield against their own self-doubt. If someone feels small, they'll try to shrink you in the eyes of others. If someone envies your progress, they'll try to twist your story until it fits their comfort zone. But none of that has anything to do with your truth. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your anchor. Marcus Aurelius said, "When another blames you or hates you, their opinion belongs to them, not to you." And that's the mindset that sets you free. You can't control what people say when you're not in the room, but you can control whether or not you let it touch your peace. A Stoic doesn't chase rumors. A Stoic doesn't go around defending themselves to every whisper. Instead, they live in a way that speaks for itself, quietly, consistently, powerfully. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Michelle, was known at her office for being calm, driven, and extremely focused. But her quiet nature made her a target. While she was working late, others were talking, saying she was cold, too ambitious, or thinks she's better than the rest. At first, those words hurt, but Michelle didn't fight back. She didn't start gossiping in return. She stayed steady, kept showing up with integrity, and let her work speak louder than the whispers. Over time, the rumors died out, and the same people who once spoke against her eventually sought her guidance. Why? Because while they were busy judging, she was busy growing. So, how do you handle people who talk behind your back? First, remember, what they reveal says more about their character than it ever will about yours. Second, don't chase explanations. Stay grounded in who you are. And third, Let your actions speak so clearly that no rumor can compete with the truth of how you live. At the end of the day, your reputation isn't built by defending your name. It's built by consistently embodying your values. When others talk behind your back, let them. They're only showing the world who they are, not who you are. Number 2, the envious will downplay your strength. Let's talk about one of the most subtle and toxic things people do behind your back. They downplay your strength when they feel threatened by your growth. These are the ones who won't openly criticize you, but behind closed doors, they chip away at your credibility. They'll say things like, "It's not that big of a deal," or "They just got lucky." And while they might dress it up as honesty or perspective, the truth is simple. Your light has grown too bright for their comfort, and they don't know how to handle it. Here's the reality. When someone sees you improving, rising, or doing something they wish they could, it shakes them. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your progress reminds them of everything they've avoided. So instead of facing their own stagnation, they attack your success. Quietly, casually, repeatedly. It's not the content of what they say, it's the energy behind it. And that energy almost always comes from a place of insecurity. This is where Stoic wisdom clears the fog. Heraclitus said, "He who envies others admits his own inferiority." Envy doesn't announce itself as envy. It comes disguised as critique, as sarcasm, or as mild disinterest. But if you pay attention, you'll hear it in their tone. They don't celebrate you when you win. They don't talk about your hard work, only your luck. They don't want others to admire your effort, because deep down, they know it reflects something they're not willing to face in themselves. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him David, got a promotion at his firm after years of putting in long hours and leading projects no one else wanted. He didn't brag. He didn't rub it in anyone's face. But almost immediately, the whispers began. A few co-workers said things like, "Well, he only got it because he's good with management," or "He got lucky with timing." Never mind the grind David put in. Never mind the extra miles he ran when no one was watching. The people who hadn't done the work couldn't stand to see someone else being rewarded for it. They couldn't admit that David had earned it, because doing so would have forced them to look at their own lack of effort. So how do you respond when people downplay your strength? First, recognize that their words are not a reflection of your worth. They're a mirror of their insecurity. Second, don't explain yourself. You don't need to justify your success to people committed to misunderstanding it. And third, stay focused. Let your consistency speak louder than their quiet resentment. At the end of the day, you'll know you're doing something right when others try to shrink your accomplishments to make themselves feel bigger. Let them talk. Let them minimize. Just keep rising, because their envy is nothing more than a quiet confession that you've already passed them. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 3, the loyal defend you, even when you're not watching. Let's talk about something rare and powerful, the kind of loyalty that reveals itself when you're not around. Most people will smile to your face. Many will laugh with you in public, but only a few will speak for you in private, when no one is watching and when they have nothing to gain. These are the people who protect your name in rooms you're not in. The ones who stop a joke that goes too far, correct a lie before it spreads, or steer a conversation away from disrespect, even when you'll never know they did it. Here's the truth. True character shows in silence. You learn more about someone by how they speak about you when you're not present than by anything they say when you are. Anyone can act kind in your company, But it takes integrity to defend someone in their absence, especially when the room is filled with people going in the opposite direction. And when someone chooses that path, they've told you everything you need to know about their character and how rare of a person they truly are. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your compass. Seneca said, "Associate with those who make you better." That doesn't just mean people who push you to grow when you're with them. It means people who honor your name when you're not. People who don't participate in pettiness. People who stay aligned with principle even when no one's watching. That's the kind of energy that strengthens your peace, sharpens your values, and protects your spirit. And when you find someone like that, you don't just thank them, you keep them close. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Eric, was the kind of leader who kept a low profile. He didn't play office politics. He just did his job well and treated people with respect. But one day, he became the target of a rumor started by someone trying to climb the ladder. The room was full. People stayed quiet, except for one colleague, Rachel. She stood up and said, "That's not true, and you know it." She didn't do it loudly. She didn't do it for attention. She just knew what was right, and she said it. Eric wasn't there. He never asked for help. But Rachel's loyalty spoke for itself. Months later, when Eric was promoted, guess who he asked to be on his leadership team? So how do you spot the loyal ones? Watch how people speak about others behind closed doors. If they protect someone who's not in the room, they're the kind who would protect you too. And if you find someone who defends you without needing to be asked, respect that deeply. That's not just loyalty, that's character. At the end of the day, words spoken in silence echo the loudest. The ones who defend your name when you're not watching have already proven where they stand. Keep those people close. They are rare and they are gold. Number 4. The insecure compare themselves to you. Let's talk about what people secretly say about you when you're not around, and how comparison often hides beneath fake praise. The insecure compare themselves to you, not out loud, not to your face, but in quiet circles, behind casual words like, "He's just lucky," or "She had a head start." They're not really commenting on your journey. They're trying to shrink it down to something they can live with. Because when your progress highlights their inaction, they don't grow. They gossip. Here's the truth. People who constantly compare themselves to others aren't focused on growth. They're stuck in resentment. Your discipline, your risks, your sacrifices, all of it becomes too much for them to acknowledge. Because if they admitted what it really took, they'd have to ask themselves why they haven't done it too. So instead, they rewrite your story. They remove the effort and replace it with luck. They blur the hardship and highlight the timing. Not because it's true, but because it's easier than admitting they stayed comfortable while you chose discomfort. This is where Stoic clarity cuts through the noise. Naval Ravikant put it perfectly. Never attribute to malice what can be explained by envy. Most people aren't out to hurt you. They're just uncomfortable with themselves. When someone says, "I could have done that too," what they're really saying is, "I didn't." When they say, "That's not impressive," it's because deep down, they wish it was theirs. Envy isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides behind a smile and a shrug. Let me tell you about Sarah. She started a small design business from her apartment while working full-time. She gave up weekends, saved every penny, and kept going even when nothing seemed to work. A few years later, her work took off. But instead of support, she started hearing the whispers. She got lucky with that one viral post. She must have had help. Sarah never said a word back. Why would she? The people who knew her journey didn't need an explanation, and the ones who didn't wouldn't understand it anyway. And slowly, she realized their envy was never really about her. It was about everything they hadn't done. So how do you handle it? First, don't shrink to make others comfortable. Second, never feel the need to defend hard-earned success. And third, let their comparisons stay theirs. They don't belong to you. At the end of the day, people compare because they're afraid to compete with who they were yesterday. You've already moved past that, and that's exactly why they talk. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a thank God and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 5. The honest speak with respect, even when you're flawed. Let's talk about what people secretly say about you when you're not around, and how it reveals the difference between judgment and respect. The honest speak with respect, even when you're flawed. They don't need you to be perfect to value you. They don't pretend you've never made mistakes. But even when you're absent, they speak of you with fairness. They acknowledge your flaws without using them as weapons. And that's what separates honesty from cruelty: intention. The truth is, the way someone talks about your flaws says more about their values than your imperfections. The honest ones don't gossip, they reflect. They might say, "Yeah, he's still working on that," or "She's got her rough edges, but she owns them." That's not sugarcoating, it's perspective. They see the whole picture, not just the part that's easy to criticize. They don't define you by your worst moments. They judge you by your willingness to grow beyond them. And this is where Stoic wisdom gives us a deeper lens. Epictetus said, "A man's worth is not in being flawless, but in being sincere." You're not supposed to be perfect, you're supposed to be real. The people worth keeping in your life will understand the difference. They won't weaponize your vulnerability. They'll protect it, even when you're not in the room. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Kevin, went through a rough season a few years back. He made some bad choices, burned a few bridges, and owned up to it. He worked to repair what he could. But as he was rebuilding, some people couldn't let go of the old version of him. They'd say things like, "That's the same guy who screwed up that deal, remember?" But not his friend Jake. Jake never pretended Kevin was flawless, but whenever his name came up, Jake spoke with respect. He made mistakes, yeah, but he took responsibility. That says more to me than perfection ever could. Kevin never heard Jake say those words directly, but when he found out later, he said that loyalty meant more to him than most apologies he'd received. So, how do you recognize the honest ones? Watch how they speak about others when no one's watching. If they can acknowledge flaws without cruelty, if they can speak truth with compassion, they've already proven they value growth over gossip. At the end of the day, perfection isn't what earns respect. Integrity does. And the people who truly see you, they'll speak with truth, not shame. Even when you're flawed, even when you're not there to hear it. Number 6. The grateful remember the little things. Let's talk about what people secretly say about you when you're not around, and how the smallest acts can leave the deepest impressions. The grateful remember the little things. They don't talk about you because you're famous or flashy. They talk about the time you stayed 5 minutes longer when they needed someone. The time you remembered something they'd forgotten they even said. The time you helped quietly without announcing it. You may not remember it, but they do. The truth is, what leaves the longest echo in someone's memory isn't the big gestures, it's the small, sincere ones. You don't need a spotlight to make an impact. Sometimes, holding space for someone when they're falling apart does more than any perfect words ever could. And often, you'll forget you ever did it. You'll move on, but they won't. They'll carry that moment with them. And when your name comes up, they won't talk about your resume or your titles. They'll say, "You know what they once did for me?" And this is where Stoic perspective reminds us of the quiet power of intention. Seneca wrote, "What you do for others is not always remembered, but it is always felt." In other words, people may forget the details, but they won't forget how you made them feel. It's not about recognition, it's about resonance. The little things stick in places applause can't reach. Let me tell you about someone named Grace. She worked in a busy hospital, quiet and consistent. One day, a young intern, let's call him Daniel, froze during an emergency. He was overwhelmed, terrified he'd made a mistake. Grace didn't scold him. She stepped in calmly, handled the situation, then gently pulled him aside and said, "You're allowed to feel nervous. Just don't let it stop you from learning." That was it. One line, one moment. She never mentioned it again. But 5 years later, when Daniel gave a talk to new interns, he shared that story, word for word. He said, "That sentence saved my confidence." So how do you live in a way that people remember with gratitude? First, don't underestimate the small moments. Second, don't wait to be noticed. Be present. And third, don't do it for credit. Do it because it matters. At the end of the day, you won't always see the ripple your actions create, but someone else might be telling your story long after you've forgotten it. And often, it's the smallest kindness that leaves the loudest echo. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply. Number 7. Your absence magnifies your value. Let's talk about what people secretly say about you when you're not around, and how sometimes they don't see your worth until you stop showing up. Your absence magnifies your value. While you're present, it's easy for people to overlook your consistency. They get used to your support, they assume your presence. But the moment you remove yourself, when the calls stop, the effort pauses, the quiet replaces your energy, that's when they finally hear the silence. And for some, it's deafening. The truth is, we don't just teach people how to treat us when we show up. We also teach them through what we no longer tolerate. When you're always available, they may assume you always will be. But when you step away, when you reclaim your energy, people begin to notice everything you once carried quietly. They see the gaps, the emotional labor, the reliability they took for granted. And often, by the time they realize it, it's too late. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes especially clear. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man is known not by his presence, but by the void he leaves." It's not always what you say or do that leaves the deepest impression. It's what's missing when you're gone. Your worth isn't in how loudly you speak, but in how loudly the room echoes when you stop speaking. The Stoic doesn't beg to be valued. They let absence speak where words fall short. Let me share a story. A man named Anthony worked for years as the steady, quiet pillar in his team. He wasn't flashy, he didn't play politics, but he made sure everything ran smoothly. People rarely thanked him, but they always expected him. One day, he took a 2-week leave. Within days, deadlines slipped, meetings derailed, The systems he managed with ease began to show cracks. That's when his co-workers started whispering, "I didn't realize how much he handled." We took him for granted. Anthony didn't return with resentment. He didn't need to. His absence had already done the speaking for him. So, how do you let your absence speak with power? First, know your worth, even when others don't acknowledge it. Second, stop over-explaining. Sometimes, silence communicates what words cannot. And third, allow distance to do its work. If your presence was never seen clearly, your absence will bring it into focus. At the end of the day, the people who only realize your value after you're gone weren't truly seeing you to begin with. But when your absence becomes the loudest voice in the room, you'll know your presence was never small. It was just quiet power they didn't know how to appreciate, until it vanished. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights.